Hey guys, so in this series, what we're gonna be doing, so basically, my husband and I, we like to do full collections of each of the sets. Um, this set is the Commander Legends. There's about 741 cards in total. That's including your tokens and your lands. Um, so basically, we like to collect them, see if we can collect them all, and kind of go from there. I'm gonna let Eric explain how he kind of puts them into the binders and does the sorting of them.
Okay, so I was playing and collecting Magic before we met, so I had a stiff start already going on it. At first, I just had them all in single sleeves because, I'm sure you know, as your collection expands, you need more and more and more boxes, and eventually you need to keep the fancy ones to one side and the potential decks to the other side, and however else you'd like to do it. When it got too big, I just decided that, you know what, we're just going to buy a whole bunch of the sleeve pages, and every set will get its own binder and its own bundle, and we'll start from there. I am a big Magic player as well, so quite a few of like the really expensive cards are obviously in the decks, and then I'll leave an empty slot in the binder, in the pages of where they go. Ooh, training center, nice. Where was I? I'll leave an empty space. Generally, I obviously keep one of everything, and then after that it switches to depending on how useful it is to my playstyle. I'm not gonna say unique by any means, but I have a certain playstyle that I like, and there's certain mechanics that I don't bother with or I don't touch. So, for example, as cool as the idea was, the dungeon delving from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, I think that you have to go fully with certain mechanics are so dominant, like the dungeon delving, that your whole deck needs to revolve around it, and generally I didn't find it interesting enough to dedicate an entire deck to just that play style. So with stuff like that, I'll just keep one copy of whatever card does it, and then if the card itself is just all about the dungeon delving mechanic, then all the other ones go to the store to sell. If they're quite a lot of the black kill spells, the green artifact destruction, just the ones that kind of fit into everything, I'll keep 2 or even 4, like Go for the Throat and Doomblade are some of my favorite creature removals, Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshare, stuff like that. I'll keep up to 3 or 4, most likely not in the binders because a lot of my cards do live in their decks, and quite frequently I'll only have 1 or 2 copies of the ones that are 20 or $30 because frankly it just gets a bit much. Obviously, especially if I like to cycle through all my decks on game nights. And then everything else just gets pushed to the store. I can't quite remember what started first, the store to sell Magic cards, or the collection to keep the Magic cards.
I think we kind of started with selling, if I am correct. You started with that, and your collections were kind of getting overwhelming the way that we had it before, so we've done it multiple different times on how to get your collections organized. It's been difficult. I forget what the first one is that we had. What was your first collection that you sorted into when we did it first? And then we changed to the binders. Oh, you had them all in every color. You color coded. Originally, it was color coded. If I'm correct, lands were kept separately, artifacts were all kept separately, and then everything was color coded. Obviously, that got overwhelming because there is so many Magic cards, and we had been buying cards from the auctions. We had been buying booster packs and commander packs and separating them out to kind of get what we wanted out of the decks and the cards. So that's when we had to make the decision to change over to binders and to do sets, which ultimately, Eric's goal has always been to collect them all. He's quite the collector. So the goal was to collect them all. And the best way to do that was to sort each set out into binders. We have a couple already done, but this is the first one that we're kind of showing you guys how we do it. I don't know if you guys might have a better suggestion on how to sort them all out. So for a collector, there's got to be more than one collector out there. It can't just be Eric. So basically, he starts out by sorting them out into color, artifact, lands, tokens, and then we will go through and start with the numbers, I guess, at the bottom. How?
Yeah, clearly Wizards of the Coasts and now whatever corporation owns it properly. Every single set is released in the same order. There is the fully colorless cards. There is white, blue, black, red, and green. Multicolor artifacts. Non-basic lands, basic lands, and tokens kind of come off the end, but the numbers always line up in that same method. So first I break everything down into... Because downstairs we have a massive game table for Warhammer, and a whole bunch of shelves, because just like Magic, Warhammer miniatures tend to multiply as you turn your back. And there we literally just started with a shoebox full of cards, and we started putting them all in their individual sets, and it just grew and grew and grew. And so they're all stacked up in a room that is off limits to cats, dogs,
Kids,
yeah. So everything is just sitting in their little sets, waiting for us now a bit, to sort more into sets. And then when the stack gets large enough that it becomes a tipping risk or a sliding risk, then that's when I pick up the whole stack and I'm like, okay, let's bundle these guys. So I think we got some older binders at auction, and it was Khans and Dragons of Tarkir, so those just happened to be the first two sets that we actually started like fully bundling them into their own binders, because the
stacks were getting outrageous, let's be honest.
Yeah, and it was the collector, or I'm assuming it was a collector, was just, it had no cutoff limit. We must have found just 12 copies of Dispel and 18 copies of certain things, and quite even pop cards that weren't particularly popular, but maybe there wasn't always such a big market for individual cards. And then from there it just kind of started cascading down, and when me and my friends pitched together and got one for Innistrad Midnight Hunt, we got two full boxes of it and had like a massive game night with 6 people. Obviously we have a ton of cards from that set, and it really just kind of depends on which is going on and which ones catches our interest. For example, I liked the Spider-Man set, but it fell a little flat. I think they did a good job on it. They introduced some new mechanics, but it didn't hit as hard as some of the previous sets have done, like Edge of Eternity, for example. I feel like that set had a much bigger impact and a lot more heavy cards. And then the Avatar one came out too recently, but I don't think neither me or Jessica grew up watching Avatar, so we're not going to get that set. Cards have a habit of trickling in here or showing up either from auctions or from friends or from friendly games or whatever. And we obviously keep everything, just about.
Collector's problems.
Yeah, and we do have a pretty stiff, we have a very rigorous quality control. I didn't see any terrible ones, but quite frequently there will be cards that have small chips on the side and stuff. Basically, as soon as they shift to the PL, the lightly played section, those are the ones that obviously don't go to the store anymore unless they're worth $5 or more for PLs, because some people will still just get the PL cards. But there were a couple of really old ones at the bottom where they had been so overplayed, and they were mostly ones that before Wizards of the Coast even started printing the little set symbols on them. But anyways, before they even started on them, and they had like the paint was starting to get scratched off and stuff, and I tossed them to the side. There's one really old swamp it's ancient and the paint is almost completely off of it. It's all scratched white, but none of that stuff is kept out. We use them for dividers and stuff like that, but we almost have
A little bit of repurposing of some of the cards.
Yeah, the stack of rejects is getting pretty big.
A little manageable. But anyways, so this is the start. So we've got our colors divided. We're gonna be moving on to, I think, the next step. Well, you do sort your lands separately, so that's probably why you only have one.
Yeah, there is just 7 boxes of old lands downstairs, and now that I've switched entirely the way how we sort and keep things, I have to start going through all my land boxes again and start putting all the lands back into the sets. That'll be a slow process.
The poor plains that has only one. So now when we mean broken cards, or cards that have scratches, dents, scuffs, the whole nines, Eric has a good example of what we're looking at, that these are the cards that we kind of toss aside or we put it in to create backers. I'm not sure, maybe you guys do something else with them, but these are the cards that we're looking at when we mean broken or scratched, scuffed.
So I've never flat out thrown out a magic card, because no matter how damaged it is, it never feels right to just throw them out. Plus, I don't think they're recyclable anyway, so it's just more garbage. And if I can find something to do with it, or give them some kid even, then to me, that's still better than just flat out throwing them out. This handful was from this morning's, the work I did this morning came right from the auction, so it's just a ridiculous variety of absolutely everything. Was this Shadow Slice? As you can see, there's dings around all the way at the corners. It's all turning white. On the back especially, like all the edges are just fully white. That's stuff that's not even going to make it into the plate section of eBay. Then there's other ones. These two are from Gate Crash. The corner's all dinged up, and there's a big crease across, more white across the bottom. Highlight Hermit, same thing, just ting 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 all the way around. Oops. Scoot. When they get less, this one just has a ding there at the top and some scuffing on the corner, which is still not going to the PL section on eBay. We just would prefer just selling.
We do a quality control check, basically. So if it has a small little scratch or whatever on one of the sides, then it might be considered PL, but other than that, we typically like to just pull them out and not even bother with them, just because we think that you guys deserve just a good product just like anybody else, so, or just like us even. That being said, we do keep a lot of PL for ourselves in our sections, because we're just going to sleeve them and then we're going to play, or they're going to sit in our collections, so at least we have the card in our collection.
That is very true. I've found several ones that were not damaged, but dinged up enough that it wouldn't be worth selling it, but they were still good enough to go in my own collections. For example, the very first card I ever purchased as a single was the Ileana Vest Planeswalker, because Ileana's cool. At the time, it was all zombies and vampires, mono black still, and it was still modern time. And I was super excited. It came in the mail in one of the hard shells. It was closed. I got home from work, and the card was in my coat pocket, because it was the dead of winter. And for some reason, that's the day that Jess decided, you know what, Eric's coat's getting a little grubby, let's throw that guy in the wash. And as soon as I was in the shower at the time, and as soon as I heard the water of the washing machine start, I yelled at the curtain, I'm like, don't, there's a card in my coat pocket! And the water, she ran back, turned it off, and the water spout had barely started into the washing machine. It had hit the chest pocket of my coat dead on, and the water had gotten into the hard shell. So I have a single Ileana Vest that has water damage on the black border of the card all the way down the sides, and she's still in the deck because mostly it's just a funny story.
I just want to note, though, who puts a magic card without a sleeve, or what did it have a sleeve?
It was in the hard shell. But
okay. Who puts a magic card in their coat pocket and then just walks away from it? That's it.
I'll leave you guys to ponder whose fault that one was. But every time it hits the table, I do get to complain about it in jest. So, the Commander Legends is all spread out into their colors. As you may know, the completely colorless cards will always be in the front. In this case, it's the Prismatic Piper. Oh, it's a perfect spot to show it. It was one of the... It's kind of an odd card to me. It's 5 blank mana. It's a shapeshifter creature, so it'll go into any tribal deck. If it is your commander, which I can't see any instance... Which I already showed it. Which I can't see any instance when it wouldn't be your commander. Because on its own it does little, and its abilities are all based on it being a commander. When it's your commander, choose a color before the game begins. The Prismatic Piper is the chosen color, so you can basically set your deck color, but yeah. And you can partner him, so you can stick him with another commander that has the same partner ability. Maybe it's a way to introduce a second or third color to your commander set if you aren't able to find a commander that fits your tribal set, and the Prismatic Piper is just a way to get an extra color into your set. Yeah, I suppose. And Commander Legends is obviously when the Commander format started pushing its way into the Magic scene, because there's several different modes before that. Modern was really popular. It's starting to come back though, but lately Commander has been pushing a lot more because it's a lot more, in my opinion, Commander is a lot more forgiving. It's a bit slower, so it's more fun for kitchen table Magic and less competitive format, because clearly a competitive game of Commander, I've seen them go from 7 minutes where somebody went infinite in their second turn with goblins, and we all just couldn't do anything but watch him go bananas on it. And I've seen a game last almost 2 hours because we just kept deadlocking each other with ghostly prisons and rest in pieces and stuff like that. Prismatic Piper, it's an iconic character. I think we'll throw 2 into the binder, and on the remaining 5 can all go to the store. I think. Not this one. This one can go to the side. These can go to the store. Oh, I guess a binder. Binder, big, massive, 82 pages, which should be enough to fit single-sided. I don't like double stacking, as I mentioned before. I have a tendency to keep 2 or 3 cards of a certain kind, so if I have 2 or 3 facing out this way, I can't really fit 2 or 3 facing the other way, and I didn't have the double-sided sleeve pages, because these all came from auction binders, and some from the dollar store, I think, too. So there's 82 pages here, which should just fit everyone bar 2 tokens, and those 2 tokens they'll go backwards in the very last page. But the Prismatic Piper is number 1 out of the very first one in the first set. Now to the white, we've got the first 4, oddly from the... Not oddly, but it's just weird that the top of the stack wouldn't be for the ones that came in the booster packs. So Wizards of the Coast will release stuff for a set, but it'll all come out in different things. The booster packs aren't even as random as we are led to believe at first, I think, because certain cards just will not come from it. At the bottom of Return to Dust, for example, you see that it's number 383, which obviously isn't the beginning of the set, but that means that it's from the part of the body that came out of the Commander decks only. So Return to Dust wouldn't have been in any of the booster packs you'd have bought for Commander Legends. So for now, we'll put all the stuff that only comes in Commander sets to the side. So we'll go through the entire cycle of booster packs, and then we'll do the Commander sets, that's the way it'll go into. That's the way it'll numerically fit in. I'm going to make separate stacks for each of the pages, because I don't know how many copies, if anything, are in any of these. So usually I'll just go 9, 18, 27, 36 based on how many of them are going to fit in on the pages. Some of these might be sleeved because they're worth money, and I don't know how much. Archon can't be that expensive. Archon of Deliverance, Coronation. Some of them are sleeved because I don't like playing with unsleeved cards altogether, clearly, so when they go into a deck, they get thrown into a sleeve, whether they're worth the plastic of the sleeve or not. If that makes sense. Some people don't mind playing with unsleeved cards, which is all up to you, clearly, because it's your cardboard, it's your money, you can play with it however you like. That's just personal preference. I love that. So we've been going for a little bit. We made a good start. And looks like what I said before might not even be true either. So we've got 2 copies of Return to Dust. But one of them is 383 and the other is 043. So I guess the ones that come in Commander decks also come in boosters? There must be one specific to Commander decks. I don't quite understand why they would print, unless they printed them... I'm just thinking out loud now. Unless they made specific decks.
Who knows what they do? They do some crazy stuff.
Oh. Oh, God.
So can we just take a minute to talk about that playmat? Originally supposed to be, I think your plan was to cut it into a piece for a dice tray for the Warhammer table. Correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, it was nice and colorful, and when you roll dice on wood, it just, because of the plywood I have, was a bit rougher. They didn't roll very nicely. So we figured we'd get a playmat to put in the bottom of the tray. The tray is not quite as big as mat.
Not even close.
So we'd have to cut a fair few strips off of it, and then I got the thing from Christmas, and then I unrolled it and unrolled it onto the table, and I couldn't. It was just too colorful and too pretty, so I didn't want to cut it up anymore.
Now you're gonna have to ignore all of the dogs and all of the crazy cats here, because
Goodness,
they're crazy. Thumbs it up.
Next, the ones. Ooh, here's a good example. While sorting, I haven't come across another copy of this Ironclad Slayer yet. However, it's dinged there and there. But in this case, because this is the first time I'm bundling this set, I'm going to stick it to the side and hold on to it anyways, because I'd rather have a slightly damaged card as part of my collection than have an empty space in the binder. The bottom one is a foil, which I don't know what the artists were thinking when they did this. But as you can see, it is a white foil card full of white coloring all over the place. What was the one in Foundations that does the same thing? Make Your Move. So it's a chess piece sitting on a piece of marble, and it's just all white, and when the light hits it a little bit too bright, it'll just blind the whole table out. So it's not a bad art, and I understand why they did what they did. It's just they should have highlighted the edges of the arbor or something. But I'm no artist by any means. So we've got all of our stuff up to the side here. These will be the next page sets. This big guy over here. First off is the Prismatic Piper, which we talked about already. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ancestral Blade. I remember buying a copy of that way back. And that was the other part. Before we started dealing with like auctions and stuff, we had to buy singles even if they were common, and then now that we've started buying auction bundles and stuff like that, we run into like cards that, oh great, we have, for example, actually this Anointer of Valor. We have a green and white or Selesnya Angel deck based on 1/1s, and I tried to stick with Angel Tribal for an additional challenge, and I think it's cool to have a host of angels. Two of my playgroups say it's a very oppressive deck. I didn't think it was that painful because there is a lot of inherently not the best cards in yet, because a lot of my decks were made with stuff I had to hand, and I pre-ordered the few key pieces that would really make it pop. Like in a Dimir Zombie deck, I ordered a copy of Rooftop Storm because that really brings the deck together. I think now we have 3 copies of Rooftop Storm because more kept coming in. But this Anointer Valor I bought at one point. It's a 5 blank and a white for a 3/5 angel with flying. Whenever a creature attacks, you may pay 3 mana. When you do, put a 1/1 counter on that creature. It sounds really harsh now that I'm reading it back after several years of playing. But at one point, I must have thought it was something fancy, because here we have a foil, which is still in the sleeve that it was in the deck in. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 other copies of that same Anointer of Valor. What do you know? So clearly we've got some empty spaces. For now we're caught up. I'm caught up downstairs with everything from Commander Legends, so it seems like we've got more collecting to do just yet. Ancestral Blade. Ooh, there's a dinghy there. It goes off to the side. To whatever what we decide to donate with it. Actually, big ass stack of Anointer of Valor. Keep a foil one just for fun. Tish, go somewhere else. Oh, we're about to get a cat butt on the table. Oh. There's a little ding in the corner of that. Anointer of Valor, which I talked about a second ago, is a relatively painful card now. But when I started making decks and I got one out of a pack, I think, or just out of somebody else's binder, and they heard I was putting together an angel deck, and they gave me this one. Like, oh, you have angels. This is angel. Put in deck. It was before all the net listing and stuff. So we'll keep 1 foil and 1 non-foil, and the other 2 can go to the store. Single Archon of Coronation. Keep that guy, 'cause you never know when somebody needs coronating. So 9 is at the bottom corner. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, I have done it where I miscounted something or put 2 of the same next to each other or some other mistake late at night. And then we get to the 90, which is where, 10 pages in, the bottom right corner should be 90. We get that far ahead and suddenly it's like, oh, the bottom right corner is 91 or 89. And then I have to go back and scooch everything over one single slot. And I think I've only had one really bad one. I can't even remember. I can't remember what set it was, but it was. I messed up somewhere in blue, and I was starting to put together the multi-lands, and it was supposed to land right perfectly at the end of the bundle pack, and it didn't land perfectly. And I started thinking, how come it doesn't? And then I started counting back, and then it turned out I made a mistake about 200 cards ago, and then I had to shift 200 cards 1 space over to the left, because I don't think I would have been able to get to sleep knowing that it was wrong. Which I hope you guys don't have that same thing. Court of Grace. It's one of the latest ones to come out. One of the latest ones to come out of my angel deck. That's why it's still in the sleeve. Enchantment, 2 blank, 2 white. When Court of Grace enters, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white spirit token. If you're the monarch, create a 4/4 angel. The reason I took it out is because the monarch makes me a target, and my angel deck isn't designed to take an awful lot of punishment. It is designed to put some angels out, and then dump out several enchantments, Dictate of Heliod and stuff like that, that suddenly all of my 4/4 angels with some Angel tribal buffs and some board white enchantment buffs, you're suddenly looking at 9/9 Angels with flying, with trample because of Angelic Skirmisher, and now there's a massive board that you can't stop. So being the Monarch didn't paid off more than it was actually helpful. And then when you're not the Monarch, you're just making 1/1 white spirits, which are okay, but board wipes are frequent enough in our play group that it wasn't worth it either. Spiller's Capsule. Cool. Court Street Denizen. The human soldier type. Soldiers and the creature archetypes like clerics and stuff really took a big jump to importance when Dungeons and Dragons came out. Well, not Dungeons and Dragons the game, but the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. I've been part of just about all that stuff since high school, so I call Dungeons and Dragons it's the actual Dungeons and Dragons game, which we did play years ago. The Magic Pod thought about getting back into Dungeons and Dragons, but trying to get everybody lined up, and we have kids, and everyone has their own lives, so trying to get 5 or 6 people in the room at the same time just doesn't always work as well as you thought. And then we live in Canada, so sometimes we just have 3 or 4 days in the middle of winter, or not even in the middle of winter, several times during the winter, where we can't see the road, we can't see the trees, the car won't start because it's too cold, or everything's covered in ice, or the roads are closed, and then it's just no game night for the next few weeks.
For the next few weeks, but try at least once a week to play.
Yeah, and the bad weather only seems to hit on the weekends.
Or school days.
Yeah, the school days have been really rough this year. It wasn't even Christmas, and somehow our daughter already missed a week's worth of school? A week and a bit? Cage of Hands, still slaved because it's an older one. It's one that I took out of my deck sooner than before. But it's just a lock-up enchantment. Enchant creature, can't attack or block, and you can pay to bounce it back to your own hand in case they try to remove their creature or something. But it's 2 blank and a white, so a little expensive for what it does. No, we definitely don't need that many copies. Just leave the one with the sleeve on it. And we'll keep 1. And the rest can go to the store. Because obviously there are things like Seal Away that permanently exile a creature or something. There's always a way to get their creatures back, but sometimes sealing away is actually more useful than outright destroying it under a path to exiling it. For example, somebody's commander. Or a creature you're planning to take later. Two of those. Ardent Intrepid. Archaeologist. Core Scout. Ooh, this would be good. Do you want to do a price check on this for me? Equipment and enchantment decks have been getting more popular.
$250.
Oh, I'll definitely throw that one to the store then. Because I definitely don't need 2 copies of it. But a friend of mine plays a Killian deck. The one from Strixhaven, I can't remember the rest of the card name, but he plays Killian, and it's all equipment and enchantments. And when he does well, he does really well, and sometimes it's just his commander getting either locked down or transformationed or sealed away or doom-bladed for several turns in a row. Luckily, Killian starts at I think it's 2 mana to cast him initially, but he gets expensive really fast. And once Killian gets to 14 mana, it's not really worth it to try to keep pushing equipment onto him. 250 is a nice find. Up to 27. 6, 5, 4, 3, 1. It's a lot of enchantments, which we know white is known for. Doomed Traveler, a worse version of Afterlife. When it dies, create a 1/1 white spirit. Which I guess is the same as Afterlife, but that's its only ability. Guilds of Ravnica did a lot of Afterlife with the Orzhov guild bracket. I think that's when I really started into playing heavily. I think me and you got a dueling, like, versus deck in when Ixalan came out. We got Jace versus...
First modern deck.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was Jace versus somebody.
Well, it was almost 10 years ago, so who knows?
Yeah. And then we really started digging heavy into, that's when I started Commander, around the time Guilds of Ravnica came out. Because obviously my first, or not obviously to you guys I suppose, but to me it was obvious that my first deck was going to be an Orzhov deck, headed by Aetherios, God of Passage. At the time it seemed really cool to have a 5/4 indestructible, and whenever a creature dies, your opponent has to pay 3 life, or the creature goes back to your hand instead. In white and black, you just fill it all with white vigilance and black death touch creatures and have them pay a ton of life, or your board just continuously regenerates. Sort of regenerates, you still have to pay the mana for it, but it was one of the few decks that I started it. It turned into essentially a pillow fort because I was so new to it. I didn't really know. I was just still learning interaction, the whole stack layering and stuff. And I took it apart to start making the Angel deck, and put all the black demons aside for a red and black demon deck that I recently started. So that deck must have been hanging for 4 years until I finally started it. But yeah, I took the Aetherios deck apart. And now, quite frequently, when my new decks work way too well, I have a Gruul red and green Ghalta, the Hunger from March of the Machines, the one that flips over into a toxic indestructible. I always have to assure everyone the rest of the deck doesn't have any toxic in it. I just like the big indestructible dinosaur, but it's all red and green aggro. Dinosaur fun, really. But when I play decks like that, and for the first 6 or 7 trial games it just waltzes over everyone at the table, then I miss my Aetherios, which was just a slower, easier experience. Because personally, if your deck takes off and somebody else's deck they're either stuck on mana or they're not pulling the right stuff, then it turns into a single player game, and then usually it's just less fun that way. You just like to actually play the game and not just bulldoze everyone. For example, when one of our pod mates makes a new deck and they get stuck on mana on the first turn, generally we're all just as happy to shuffle our hand after 3 turns and he's still landlocked on his first land and missed 2 land drops in a row, or 3 or 4 land drops in a row. I don't think we ever let it get to 4. I think the rule is if you miss 3 land drops, depending on how everyone's feeling, you can just go fetch a land from the bottom. But if your deck gets that hamstrung, then usually we're just as happy to shuffle our own hands back into our decks and carry on. Iona's Judgment is one of the examples that they just need to fill space. 4 blank and a white to exile target creature or enchantment. Doesn't sound terrible, but there is much better, more cost-efficient way of doing it. So we'll just keep 1 in the binder and the rest can go to the store. Because who knows why people specifically need that. Maybe you have ways to make your spells that much cheaper, your instances or sorceries that much cheaper. My decks tend to be heavier on permanence, mostly because I put in enough ways to bring permanence back. And it's a little tougher to get instances or sorceries back without having to exile them afterwards. A bird. Let's see. So, 27, 28, 29.
It's green or red? Which one's usually next?
Green is last, it'll be black. It's blue, black, and then red and green is at the very end. As I said, it pays off, for me at least, to just count out. Because if you lose track of it, then it just takes forever and a day to try to go back and take apart every single page and move them all one space to the left or the right. But I also couldn't stand the fact that if you're sitting there and there's one space in the middle of a page and every time you flip through your bundle to look for something or just to enjoy your collection there's a gap in the middle, that doesn't mean that you don't own a card, it just means that you've miscounted someday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No thank you, Tish.
Almost done the white.
2 more pages of it. Core cartographer. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a planes. Put it onto the battlefield, tap, and shuffle. Doesn't sound bad, but unless you have some automatic recursion, 3 and 1 is 3 blank and 1 white is pretty steep for a single planes. And if you can afford 4 mana to drop a single extra planes, it's too advanced in the game to have to worry about your own mana. Could be fun. 9th Bridge Patrol. Whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, which includes exile, because it's not a death trigger, put a 1/1 counter on 9th Bridge Patrol. So if somebody board wipes and you have a way to give it indestructible, you're left with 1 massive creature while everybody else is scrambling to put something in front of it. Palace Sentinels. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. For quite a while I've wanted to put together a Monarch deck, but the whole deck would be centered, obviously headed by Queen Marchesa, who else? But the whole deck would be centered about regaining or keeping the Monarch. So probably closer to a Pillow Fort again. But Aetherios is in there, so there's no Pillow Forts left. 6, 7, 8, 39, 40, 41. 2. 2. 4. Oh, I missed that one. That's right. So as tall as the stack was, we clearly didn't have as many, because we're leaving quite hefty gaps in every single page. But the stack was getting too big, so now was the time to bundle. Raise the alarm. 1 blank, 1 white, instant. Create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Come in handy in a pinch, especially. keep 1 foil and 2 regulars. Turn to dust. Rebek. Can I get a price check? Rebek. Rebek? I don't know. I'm from Europe originally, so if my pronunciation is weirder than it's supposed to be, I apologize in advance. Legendary creature, Artificer. Goodness. Artifacts you control have protection from each converted mana cost amongst artifacts you control. We've seen lately that artifacts have become a lot more prominent, and there's some bigger YouTube personalities that play exclusively artifact decks. Kamigawa came out with a whole bunch of artifacts, and several of the newer sets have been dipping because artifacts are perfect for bridging the gaps in between your decks. Right? If you have an old black deck, for example, the black is not known for its life gain. If you can get Vessel of Immortality in there or something like that to offset the one thing your color lacks, at least that's what I do. I made a while back. I made a old colorless Eldrazi deck. It started out as Eldrazi, and then Eldrazi did Eldrazi things, and everyone decided that we should turn down the Eldrazi a little bit and turn it into a colorless deck just for fun. Made possible by Oath of the Gatewatch finally coming out with the Wastes basic land. Before that, I'd started putting together the deck before the basic Waste came out, but obviously the mana base was really odd because it all had to come from the wonky lands that don't always promote it. But that deck lacked quite a few things, and the artifacts did a nice job offsetting everything. 4, 5, 10, 54. Is that foiled Vow of Duty? Ready to blind everybody for the rest of eternity. 3, 2, 1. I think the reason I started keeping cards I didn't play is because the art style is just sometimes so cool and impressive. I'm partial to monsters and Eldrazi, but Soul of Eternity, for example, I just love the way that looks. Right.
Well, what's left? What do you got?
That's all the white. Ready for blue? Couple. I'm missing 1 or 2 cards every page. It's not bad at all. I've seen much worse.
Well, I think that is going to wrap up this video, but next one, let's dive into some more colors and get this Commander Legends finished. See what we have left. Okay, remember to like, comment, subscribe to see what we get into next and see how the blues turn out.